Awesome. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to our Charting the Course monthly Q&A series where we're excited to be doing this live on LinkedIn today. I'm Fanta, the Director of Business and Human Rights at RFK Human Rights, where we engage with investors and corporations to tackle the root causes of inequality. And I'm super excited to be joined today by Dr. Vivienne Ming, who's a theoretical neuroscientist, entrepreneur, and author. She co-founded Socos Lab, her fifth company, and an independent institute exploring the future of human potential. Dr. Ming launched Socos Lab to combine her varied work with that of other creative experts and expand their impact on global policy issues, both inside companies and throughout our communities. She's also on the board of RFK Human Rights. And during our conversation today, we'll explore Dr. Ming's journey and experiences, the perils and possibilities of AI, its implications for human rights, and reimagining AI deployment and development. So thank you for joining me, Dr. Ming.
Of course, it's always a thrill chatting with you.
Always, always. Always a pleasure whenever we get to meet face to face, whether it's virtually or in person. And I just discover so much about you each and every time, and I'm consistently just fascinated by you and the work that you do, and it always leaves me eager to dive deeper into your story. So I'm excited that we had this time today. So from our conversations, Dr. Ming, I've learned that your life has spanned an expansive range of issues, experiences, and knowledge. So tell us more about what brought you to where you are now, and what are the lessons and philosophies that guide you?
Gosh, that's such a big and open question. So I'll try to be done by 5 p.m. Pacific time. Obviously I've gone through a number of different careers. I was an academic at Cal and Stanford, and I love being a scientist. I'm still fundamentally a scientist in how I approach my work and my life. I had the terrible idea with my wife of launching an ed tech company back in 2007, I believe, using AI in education when nobody knew what AI was and nobody thought education was a business for a startup to be in. There's no Khan Academy, there's no Coursera, there's none of that sort of stuff. But it was kind of addictive. You know, what I loved about being an academic was exploring the unknown. What I loved about being, and still love to this day, about being an entrepreneur was going out incredibly fast and trying to solve a problem. And if you add in one other element of my life, which is, although it started wonderfully, after a little self-mismanagement, I ended up homeless for a good chunk of the 90s. And boy, I really got a completely second shot at life. And when something like that happens for you, and you find that one of the things you happen to be good at is diving into challenging problems and just throwing yourself at them and learning how to make a difference there, it kind of led to my last, and let's call it current career, which is people bring me challenging problems. And if I feel like my team and I can make a difference, I pay for everything, and whatever we invent, we just give away. And it's not to say, nothing commercially ever comes of that. I have a company that I love working on a treatment for Alzheimer's. Another has the first ever biological predictor of postpartum depression. And we have an amazing journey and story to share. But ultimately, both of those projects for me started because I was interested in traumatic brain injury in kids, because I was interested in how our hormones affect our emotions. They were just explorations of the unknown that I thought should happen. It just turned out they had some legs and turned into some businesses. Usually they don't. Yeah. But when you get to measure how you spend your hours by how many people are alive at the other end, then it doesn't really matter what the revenue model is. What matters is that you committed yourself to something that makes other people's lives better.
That's so interesting. And, like you brought up several points about like diving into challenging problems and exploring the unknown. And you also touched on, your work around education and healthcare. And, right now I want to kind of talk about, diving into challenging problems and that problem or possibility is AI, right? And there's so much dialogue, whether it's excitement, criticism around the use of AI, especially in education, in healthcare, and other historically human-centered industries, right? What lessons and perspectives from neuroscience, from reinforcement theory, to how trust is being developed inform your perspectives about the perils and possibilities of AI?
Yeah, I built my first AI model. Not the first time I ever thought about artificial intelligence. I'm a little nerdy sci-fi kid, so I mean, I don't know, the Cylons maybe in the original Battlestar Galactica. That was my introduction to AI. There are so many. 2001, but the first thing I ever built was my undergraduate honors thesis, and it was a system that could tell the difference from a fake and a real smile off of a camera, just analyzing someone's face. And, what's interesting in my relationship, now spanning 25 years with artificial intelligence, is the stories in the public tend to be dominated by two camps. We can call one the accelerationists. AI will fix every problem. It's amazing. Just let us do whatever we want and we'll save the world. And the doomers who think AI will destroy everything. It's inevitably Skynet. And if it's not that, it's just us being bad. And maybe it's because I didn't build AI. I'm not a computer scientist. I'm a neuroscientist. My PhD is in psychology and computational neuroscience. For me, it was a tool. How can this make something better? How can it improve my research? How can I use it to improve cochlear implants to help deaf people hear? How can I use it to reunite orphan refugees with their extended family members? How can I use it to help an autistic children learn how to read a facial expression? At the same time I've worked on those projects, I have built companies that use AI to decide who gets jobs. I have worked on academic projects, but nonetheless, projects around loans and how do you make certain AI-driven loan systems share loans fairly. Two of my companies are working in medicine right now. And so I'm intimately familiar with both faces of AI. It's not one, it's not the other. It's not magic. It's not the end of the world. It's an immensely powerful tool, which we could make the choice to use well and make our lives better. And it's enormously difficult to make choices like that. It would be so much easier if we could just say, yes, like social media, no regulation. We're just going to let it proliferate because it's going to democratize the world. Right. Well, that clearly didn't play out the way we expected it to. But at the same time, no to everything. We won't allow it. People will die of treatable diseases. People will toil away on tasks that they don't need to be doing, that frankly, I don't believe human beings should be doing. I grew up in the Salinas Valley where John Steinbeck is from. And, the army of human beings that go out in fields every day, picking lettuce is something we should take seriously. It's something he wrote about, but of course the people he wrote about weren't people coming across the border. They were people coming from Oklahoma to California and were treated exactly the same. And I say this just because when you look at AI in terms of what good can this bring into the world in a targeted, specific way, and not what dreams do I have or nightmares, it just transforms your relationship with this. You just recognize it's a tool. It's a tool that can make a difference. And we should be investing in, but we should also not just say, open AI, Google, do whatever you want. Here's all of my data. I know you will always treat it well. In fact, I have just written a piece, which will be part of my new book, but we're also getting out there in a placement. And it has this following, I think, to many people, very provocative idea that access to artificial intelligence acting unambiguously on your behalf should be a civil right, just as access to a lawyer or a doctor. And that's because the systems I built decided who got jobs. They decided who got loans. They decide who gets medical treatment, who gets attention from the police. And those decisions happen in 5 milliseconds in a server somewhere in Wyoming. And you never even knew it happened. And in the American legal system, who knows how that decision was made, and if it was made because you voted for the wrong person. I mean, let's make a clear example of something I think both sides of the political divide are really sensitive to right now. The idea that your political leanings might decide whether you get a job or not.
Exactly.
And that should be a protected part of our lives. So, this is where I've come into in this space. And yes, trust me, I have a lot to say about the neuroscience of trust and this amazing research we've had to do in this space, but specific to AI and its implications for civil rights, even when it works perfectly, as advertised. We imagine a truly fictional world in which it's unbiased, in which it never makes errors. That's untrue. But we can imagine it's true. It's still only working for the people who built it. And no system that makes decisions fundamental to our civil rights should act only in the interest of others.
I want to dig into that a bit more, right? And I think that you having this, experience in AI for 25 years, definitely want to hear more about your take on bias and ethics and human rights. And as a leader in the human rights space, right, it is my responsibility to call out, the human rights implications of tools, technologies, programs, et cetera, right? So, this idea that AI today is fundamentally incompatible with human rights, right? Let's dig into that a little bit more. And I'd love to know your thoughts on that, but also would love to know, what do you think would need to change for that to no longer be the case? And what would it take to eliminate, let's say, racial and gender bias in AI?
So interestingly, on some level, those are two separate questions. And the issue of bias and even just recently, there was a paper published showing, for example, that when you interact with, say, ChatGPT, but it would be true of any of these big models, Gemini and Claude and others that come out, that the nature of your language, in the case of these researchers, using traditionally African-American vernacular, actually caused it to preferentially show jobs associated with lower incomes and to make judgments essentially about you. Let's be super clear. GPT actually isn't making a judgment. It's the world's largest autocomplete. It doesn't really care that it in a sense isn't racist. What it is a reflection of the society it was trained on.
Exactly. Yeah.
And in that sense, of course, it is trivially obvious that trained on American history and all of our texts and tweets and reports, that it's going to incorporate that it's going to identify with deep ideas in sort of the American psyche about women's place in the family and different roles. I'm sure, by the way, some groups probably in some quirky yet still racist ways benefit from those traditions and assumptions. So that's one set of issues. And here's the scary thing I'm going to say about it, but it's not the end of the day. You can't get rid of that. That is the nature of modern artificial intelligence. It is powerful and it can do so much and so much good, but it is fundamentally a reflection of history.
It's true.
And part of the issue might be it's a reflection of the correlations in history rather than the causes. I know that can get a little wonky and nuancy sometimes, but if we thought about what causes someone to be great at their jobs versus what correlates with someone getting a promotion, now we're talking about two very different things. And while there are people working hard on causality and artificial intelligence, these models are all about correlations, incredibly powerful, finely detailed ones, but they're there. And again, it doesn't take a deep read of American history to understand that those correlations are going to tell a story. Women tend not to get promoted as quickly as men. Is that causally because they're not good at their jobs? No, it isn't. But it is history. And that's all these systems understand, to the degree that that's a statement of what they can do. So does that mean they are completely useless? One, no, because in fact, these systems have gotten better over time. I mean, trust me, it used to be that a facial recognition system simply would not see you at all. Dark skin meant you were out.
Right.
Now, it's just not as good. A dark-skinned female face, most production facial analysis systems don't work as well. I don't think that's acceptable, but I am noting there has been real progress here. I'll even give some acknowledgement behind the scenes because I've had the chance to do collaborative research with some of the big players in this space. When Google had a decade ago, had a notorious case where it mislabeled a Black couple as gorillas in an automated photo captioning system. Behind the scenes, they had an absolute, crisis of faith in AI.
It's horrible.
So, it isn't so clear as somehow like they were racist and so they produced a racist system, but rather they weren't thinking about the full implications of what they were doing. They weren't taking what bluntly, for a company that had very few Black employees at the time, what they may have thought of as an edge case seriously enough. And when that happened, behind the scenes, it was a disaster for them. It doesn't mean the problem has gone away. And unfortunately, what I'm saying here is the way AI is built today, that problem isn't going to go away. In fact, bias in AI is kind of a mathematical fundamental. You're asking systems, for example, humans, to make a judgment about a world in which they're imperfect and the evidence in the world is imperfect. And it turns out you can actually prove mathematically that you have to be biased to be able to be effective. And you can make, in the equations we build, you can fine tune, do I trade off more bias or do I trade off more being able to generalize to new cases well? But somewhere the system has to give. Here's what I think is potentially exciting. Because we build AI, we can say, well, humans are biased and AI is biased, but it doesn't have to be biased in the same way. In fact, we can build a bunch of different AIs that are each biased in different ways. If bias is inescapable, then maybe we can understand something which, by the way, is 100% true, but will take a model of human existence. Diverse teams are smarter. Turns out it's just as true of artificial intelligence. If you view it as another team member or even multiple AIs as new team members and they bring something unique rather than somehow they are mathematically perfect, unbiased systems, now we can build, a team that's actually doing something useful in the world and is better than any of its members alone, including the AI itself. So that's one set that clearly I can ramble on forever. And it's one that captures a lot of our attention because that bias is real and it's ongoing. And I know it may sound kind of depressing to some people for me to say it's also inescapable. But it is, and I think it's so much more useful if we think about, well, how do we still find value in a tool which is imperfect, in a hammer that doesn't always work the way we want it to. And if we can engage with that idea, the same way we engage with the idea that human beings are imperfect and we don't throw them away either, then we can find some real value. On the other hand, if these tools are only built by 6 companies, if they are only within the control of 2 countries in the whole world, if literally a room full of people would represent the entire population of decision makers, now we're in a different world. We're in a world where what is in their self-interest, even if one of them was the genius that proved everything I just said wrong, they built the perfect unbiased system. It always does the right thing. Then we're still left with the question, it does the right thing for whom? For them or for me?
Exactly.
Is it diagnosing my disease, or is it deciding what diagnosis would be best for their company? Is it giving me the loan that I need, or the loan that would generate the most total revenue for their bank? And these, I know rational self-interest is a dominant theme in the economic world today, but it only works if everyone gets to participate. And if we don't get to choose whether or not AI makes these decisions for us, if we don't get to bring our own AI to court to argue why I shouldn't go to prison, why I shouldn't be receive extra scrutiny from the police, but the other side does, as though somehow it was unbiased. Now, this is the world I'm describing, in which AI has currently released into the world. Not AI in an idealized sense, but as it currently exists in the world, is just fundamentally incompatible with any modern notion of civil rights. Because what does it mean for me to have my own doctor if the AI, if every doctor is using the exact same AI diagnostics and there is no such thing as a second opinion, or 2, it's immediately sharing all that diagnostic information with the people that built it. And then that information, let's say if that diagnosis was a severe risk of postpartum depression, and that information is being sold by a data broker on to the Attorney General of Texas, then now they know things about me and my life that my doctor, my human doctor, would never have a legal right to share. So these are the things that actually worry me, not more than algorithmic bias. But after 25 years, I have become so accepting of the idea that these systems are imperfect that it no longer shocks me when I see examples that they are. It is when we imagine that they're perfect, and we don't think about who they're serving. That is where I really worry.
Wow, you just said so much, and such powerful things that you just said. And I want to touch on this conversation as relates to labor, right? You mentioned, decision makers and control and, participation of, people and societies and community. And is it best for society, or is it best for the decision maker, right? And I want to touch on that, especially as it relates to labor. So many people are really afraid about what AI can do as it relates to labor, right? But AI, has already changed the way that many of us work, right? And it will continue to have that impact in labor for years to come. So as we continue down this current path where the same players control AI infrastructure and deployment, and they continue to influence policy, where do you think we will be in, let's say, 10, 20 years going down this path?
Yeah, I mean, again, I just want to remind the audience, because maybe I sound a little bleak. I built 6 companies around using AI to do what I at least in my heart believe are amazing things in education, workforce itself, in healthcare. I've been a chief scientist and launched philanthropic ventures, maybe an order of magnitude more projects, almost all of which somehow involve artificial intelligence, machine learning. So I believe that this can be a tool to bring societal good into the world. But again and again, I end up with the question of for whom?
Exactly.
So here's a common refrain. AI will eat all of the jobs and leave nothing behind for humans to do. And an equally common one is no. In fact, I literally just heard someone on, I think, the San Francisco Fed board say this one. No. Every industrial revolution has created more jobs than it's destroyed. As though those are the only two questions of interest. I have no idea if modern artificial intelligence, no idea, me speaking as a scientist, I'm not much of a futurist, so I don't know for certain whether AI will create more jobs than it destroys, but it seems very plausible to me that it will. But let me give this thought experiment, which it doesn't seem like anyone else is thinking of. Automation from artificial intelligence is fairly different than automation of, let's say, the factory line with a steam engine, or the diesel engine, or the electrification, or other automation that has come before, because it's cognitive automation. We often think of automation slowly eating up the lowest skilled work and pushing us to this better future. It's almost an engine of the American dream, consuming the lowest level of work and pushing everyone towards higher level, more knowledge worker type jobs, which is a wonderful idea. And it was true for that long post-war period. But since about the 1990s, labor demand has looked distinctly different than that. Instead of demand increasing with skill level, demand is incredibly peaky at the two extremes. The highest skilled jobs and the lowest skilled jobs have massive increases in demand over the last 30 years. Dishwashers on one side, petroleum engineers, elite managers, neurologists on the other side. And there's actually negative demand in between. A lot of great jobs, many of which required a university degree, have been dropping in demand. And that would be inexplicable if you just thought the world was about skill levels and automation ate jobs from the bottom up. In reality, with AI, let's work through a thought experiment. You are the CEO of a multinational corporation with 100,000 employees. And we're part of this amazing future in which AI doesn't destroy jobs, it creates jobs, or it transforms them. How about? So new AI, let's say you just signed a deal with Google and Gemini is now going to automate away. It doesn't really automate jobs, it automates tasks, but nonetheless, for practical purposes, about 80% of your workforce is now redundant. But it created 100,000 new jobs, net gain, exactly as predicted. But here's the thing, by their very nature of AI, all of those jobs must be above the skill level of what came before. Because if it just created a new lower skill job, it would do it itself.
Exactly, yeah.
So what's left? So for me, the question nobody has been asking is, yes, AI will create new jobs, but who's going to be qualified to fill them? Because I'm willing to bet if you're the CEO of that multinational and I asked you, how easy is it to fill those top 20% jobs already today? You're probably, oh my God, it is so hard. The competition for elite global talent is crazy. And now I'm telling you, well, now you've got to fill another 100,000 of those jobs. Where are those people supposed to come from? I know it can sound dark, but those previous employees, if they were capable of filling those higher end jobs, they would already have been doing so. Now, I want to say this. I actually believe we can all fill those jobs. But we can't do them if we simply view human beings as a bunch of skills on a resume. You know how to do this specific concrete task, and maybe we can retrain you into something very similar to that. If instead we thought and we built education systems and we built mechanisms for actually engaging with workers across their entire lives, not just to reskill them or to upskill them, but to actually build them. Because here is going to require a couple of chapters from my book that we're not going to take a tour through here in the moment. But in the end, in a world with AI and cognitive automation, the most valuable thing that you can bring to the labor market isn't that you know how to write code, because all of these models can do that already. It isn't that you know how to read contracts, because literally a paper just came out showing that GPT, in fact, every one of these models can read contracts better than human beings, better than the people who are currently doing it, at 99.7% lower cost.
Wow.
Humans don't win those battles of hard skills. So what is your value add in the world? It's you. It is your ability to explore the unknown and say something unique about it. That's not really what AI can do, because as we talked about earlier, AI is history. AI is the patterns that have been emerging throughout all of history. Does it say it has no value in innovation? I use it all the time. There are cool things going on there. But fundamentally, we're the ones that can actually do new creative labor in the world. And until we view human beings as the creative wellsprings of our economy and not as a list of skills on a resume, then what's going to happen is AI creates lots of jobs, and this chasm grows between people filling terrible, low pay, zero future jobs and people that have the chance to transform the world. And everything in between slowly goes away. That is something I do not see getting talked about in these two overly simplistic models of there's jobs for everyone or there's jobs for no one.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Explore the unknown, right? I feel like in this labor conversation, it's, to your point, two different sides, and we don't see other perspectives when it comes to labor. So that was definitely interesting to hear, and definitely something I'm gonna start thinking about, right? Exploring the unknown when it comes to like what your value is. I know we're at time, but in the spirit of, you know, we spoke a lot about the perils and we spoke a lot about the harms of AI, but I also love how you spoke about the opportunities, right? And the progress and what good AI can be as well. So I want to tap into your inner nerdy sci-fi self. And, you know, a lot of AI thought leaders, right, reference the future of AI to science fiction films, right? Like Blade Runner, Terminator, Star Wars. If we get AI right, what movie or show would we be living in? Or maybe it's an edit to a past or current movie or show that we would be living in if we got AI right.
You know, I don't think there is one future. There's choices. Obviously, I'm alluding to a bunch of bad choices we could make that could lead to dismal futures, but there's different sorts of choices of other kinds of futures. If you're a real sci-fi nerd, for example, there is a series of books about this AI post-singularity future where it does every amazing thing for us and allows us to flourish. And I love those ideas, but actually, let me provide a provocative one. It's actually a story I wrote, and coming out in a new book, because if you're as demented as I am, your nonfiction books have fiction in them.
Yes.
And it's a world where you never interact with AI. So in artificial intelligence, we sometimes talk about artificial general intelligence, AGI. The idea that if you reach this point that it's generally intelligent, it will inevitably become super intelligent and smarter than we are. So I wrote a short story about artificial general luck, an AI we never actually interact with. But suddenly our world is just naturally filled with the most astonishing serendipity. Every elevator you walk up to is right there waiting for you. The minute you step out the door, there's a car waiting to pick you up. If you think too hard about it, then you realize, oh my goodness, this car must have been headed here before I even thought about leaving the building.
Right.
Needless to say, long before any tiny polyp in your colon ever becomes cancer, these are all getting dealt with. And you never have to think about it. But here's that future with nothing else. Then we become the Eloi. We become, from the time machine. Here's the thing. We need to be lucky enough to experience hardship. We need to have the incredible good fortune that throughout our day, the world pushes back on us just enough for us to grow. That the goal of this AI that exists, but which we never truly talk to, is to make the best possible person it can make. And sometimes that means in the world of artificial general luck, you've got to stub your toe. Because it turns out one of the biggest predictors of long-term life outcomes, for example, is resilience. And here's the brutal truth about resilience. The only way to become more resilient is to experience hardship, push through, and find success out the other side. So in the perfect world where AI gives us everything, just what we need, just when we need it, some of what it gives us is occasionally a little brutal. And really asks us to think for ourselves. In other words, in a world of perfect artificial general luck, it only ever gives us what we need, not what we want.
That is a perfect way to end this. I was going to ask you what you wanted to leave us with, but that's just a perfect way to sum it up. Before I let you go, Dr. Ming, what's coming up for you? Like, I know you mentioned the short story. You also mentioned your book earlier. Can you give us a little bit of a preview of that? What should we be looking forward to?
Absolutely. How to robot proof yourself. The final draft, from me at least, is nearly done. God knows how long it will take a publisher to actually bring this into the world. I'm in the flattering position of getting to be able to choose which one. But if you're desperate to read the related material, you could visit Socos.org, where I share stories about my research, and some upcoming chapters of the book are already available there.
Exciting.
I will be in London. I'll be in Seoul, Paris, Stockholm, DC over the upcoming months. And so the opportunity to visit and talk about AI, talk about the neuroscience of trust, talk about pretty much anything that my demented mind thinks would be interesting, and occasionally make it engaging and funny. It's a real pleasure. So this is what's coming up, and we also have very soon some big announcements from my company working in postpartum depression. So keep tuned in, and there'll be more on that.
Awesome. Well, I'll definitely be tuned in, and I'm excited that I get to see you during one of your travels for our part 2 of this conversation at the Cape in June for our flagship Summer Investors Conference. So really excited about that, and just really excited about following your journey, reading your book, reading your short story, and just reading more about you and like hearing your different perspectives. So thank you so much for taking the time to be here today, to have this conversation with us. And also thank you to our audience for, joining us today for this really insightful conversation into the realms of AI, human rights, the future, what does the future look like, the progress of AI, the possibilities, and of course, touching on the risk as well. You've definitely, Dr. Ming, illuminated my understanding and challenged me as well, right, to envision a future where AI is harnessed for the greater good of humanity. So as we end and chart the course ahead, let's all embrace Dr. Ming's wisdom and strive for a future where AI deployment is guided by the principles of inclusion, dignity, and human creativity, as you mentioned. So excited, right, to really work with all of you on today and to continue to work with my team and with you, Dr. Ming, on thinking about what the future of AI looks like. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It was lovely, and I look forward to seeing you on the Cape.
Yes, I'll see you soon. Bye.